Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping straight into a book that literally laid the groundwork for the modern world. Adam Smith's 1776 masterpiece, The Wealth of Nations. This isn't just some dusty old textbook. It is the absolute foundation of modern economics. Today, we're going to decode exactly what creates a nation's prosperity and see how Smith's ideas completely rewired global thinking. So, let's get right into it. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be redefining a nation's wealth, breaking down the division of labor, demystifying the invisible hand, looking at capital and growth, exploring free trade, and finally wrapping up with Smith's ultimate goal, universal opulence.
All right, part one, redefining a nation's wealth.
If I asked you right now, what actually makes a country rich? You might naturally picture a giant Scrooge McDuck-style vault overflowing with gold bars and jewels. And you wouldn't be alone in thinking that. That was actually the dominant belief back in the 18th century. But Adam Smith came along and asked us to look at this in a completely different way. Take a look at this stark contrast. On one side, you have mercantilism. This was the old school system that believed a nation's wealth was literally just the amount of gold and silver it could hoard. On the other side is Smith's massive breakthrough. He completely shattered that obsession, arguing that true wealth isn't gold gathering dust in a vault. It's the annual flow of goods and services produced by a nation's labor. Basically, a country's wealth is the actual, tangible standard of living of its people. Moving on to part two, division of labor and productivity. To really grasp how to maximize this flow of goods, Smith zooms us all the way down to the microscopic level. Picture a single worker, totally unspecialized, trying to make a metal pin from scratch. Doing every single step by themselves, they'd be lucky to pump out maybe 20 pins in an entire day. It's incredibly tedious, painstakingly slow work. But watch what happens when we tweak the process. Instead of one person doing the whole shebang, the complex task is broken down into 18 distinct specialized steps. One person draws the wire, someone else cuts it, a third points the end, a fourth adds the head, all the way down to the final packaging. Each worker is just doing one specific step over and over again. And look at this massive gap. By dividing the labor, a tiny team of just 10 workers doesn't just make 200 pins. Their output completely skyrockets to a staggering 48,000 pins a day. I mean, that is thousands of pins per worker. It's an unimaginable leap in productivity compared to the guy working solo. So why does this massive leap happen? Well, it boils down to three key things. First, workers gain just incredible dexterity and skill from doing the same motion repeatedly. Second, you literally save time because nobody's walking between workstations or fumbling to swap tools. And third, and this is really cool, laser-focused workers naturally start inventing specialized machinery to make their one specific task even easier. It is basically the ultimate engine of productivity. Which brings us to part three, the invisible hand demystified. Okay, so we've seen how goods are efficiently made on the factory floor. But zoom out for a second. How are thousands of different goods distributed across an entire country without some grand central planner barking orders? This is where Smith's most iconic concept comes in. He pointed out that your local baker doesn't wake up at 4 a.m. to bake bread just because he's a super nice guy. He does it out of self-interest, to make a living. But by trying to maximize his own profit, the baker is led by an invisible hand to accidentally promote the prosperity of the whole society. Consumers get fresh bread, the baker gets paid, everybody wins. To understand how this organic market actually functions, Smith draws a line between two types of value. First, value in use. That's the practical, life-saving utility of something like water. Then you have value in exchange, which is the price an item commands on the open market, like a diamond. Water is obviously infinitely more useful than a diamond, but diamonds have a higher exchange value because of all the toil and trouble it takes to dig them up. And these market prices, they act as vital, flashing signals to everyone in the economy. Let's see how those price signals play out in practice. If prices are high, consumers back off, but producers rush in to supply more. That creates a surplus, which organically drives prices back down. On the flip side, if prices drop too low, consumers buy more, producers pull back, and boom, you get a shortage that drives prices right back up. The genius here is that self-interested buyers and sellers naturally gravitate toward an equilibrium. Millions of independent decisions coordinate perfectly smoothly, and society's total welfare gets maximized without anyone steering the ship. Part 4, Capital, Labor, and Growth. So if the invisible hand manages the daily market, what's driving long-term economic growth over decades? Smith argued it all comes down to the types of labor happening in your economy. He categorized them into two buckets: Productive labor, think manufacturing workers, produces tangible goods that actually add to the nation's permanent capital stock. Then there's unproductive labor, like servants or even government officials. They provide services that get consumed immediately. They're necessary, sure, but they don't leave a lasting physical asset behind. Now, when a nation prioritizes saving and productive labor, it triggers this incredible feedback loop. Check this out. You accumulate capital, which lets you hire more productive workers. Those workers generate even greater wealth, which is then reinvested into better machinery, bigger factories, and even more division of labor. It becomes this unstoppable, virtuous cycle of long-term economic growth. On to part 5, free trade and government. We've built our economy up from the factory floor, so now we have to look outward. How should this prosperous nation interact with the rest of the world? Remember those mercantilists we talked about earlier? They loved throwing up tariffs, creating monopolies, and aggressively pushing trade surpluses just to hoard more gold. Smith heavily criticized this. He argued that nations should act exactly like the workers in our pin factory. Under a free trade system, a country should just specialize in what it does best, its absolute advantage, and simply trade freely for everything else. Restricting trade, that really only raises prices and hurts your own citizens. But let's be super clear here. Smith wasn't some anarchist advocating for zero government. He was incredibly pragmatic. He outlined that the state has absolutely crucial roles. It has to protect property and enforce contracts so markets can actually function safely. It also needs to provide critical infrastructure, think roads, bridges, basic education, stuff that private markets just wouldn't find profitable to build on their own. But the key caveat? The government has to avoid favoritism, monopolies, and market manipulation that only serves a few wealthy insiders. Finally, part 6, legacy of universal opulence. So we've seen the mechanics of Smith's framework, but let's take a second to look at his monumental legacy. Smith actually viewed human progress as this grand evolution through distinct stages. We started with basic hunting for survival, moved to pastoral herding, then into agricultural feudal systems. But he believed that with the right institutions and sound policies, humanity was finally crossing into the highly advanced commercial era in 1776, a true era of free enterprise. And what was the ultimate goal of this commercial era? It's a concept Smith called universal opulence. You see, he wasn't just trying to make rich merchants even richer. He genuinely believed that open markets, individual liberty, and fierce competition would generate so much wealth that it would continuously raise the standard of living for everyone, especially the poorest and most vulnerable members of society. As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. Just take a second and look around your room right now. Look at your phone, the clothes you're wearing, the materials in your walls. Think about the massive, highly specialized global supply chains that seamlessly delivered all of those items to you today, all without a single central planner telling them to do it. It kind of makes you ask, how much of your world, right in this exact moment, is still being quietly and perfectly guided by Adam Smith's invisible hand? Thanks for joining me today, and keep questioning the incredible systems that shape our world.